Not far from the city, in the shadow of a dense forest, stands the long empty estate of the Bright family. His gloomy face, which had attracted me almost since childhood, was again revealed to my gaze. The windows boarded up with boards and the long dilapidated facade of the building completely hinted to uninvited guests about its desolation. Although, of course, this was not always the case. When I was still an immature boy, I often ran to look at the only old house in the area. The Bright family, which at that time already consisted of old William and his sick sister Sarah, lived in it. And if William himself was quite an ordinary elderly gentleman, then Sarah truly inspired fear in our still fragile minds. The existing illness, unfortunately still unknown to me, distorted her face and body like a doll bent in several places. She spent most of her time inside the estate and only occasionally got out. But I'm ashamed to admit that back then, being complete fools, we often hid at the edge of the forest, hoping to wait for her to appear. Among the children of our small town, there were many rumors about the Bright family, and in particular about Sarah. Either the ignorance of that time or the lack of our upbringing forced us again and again to come up with terrible stories about the ill-fated estate, and moreover, test your courage in every possible way, making your way into his territory. As we did on that fateful day. Early in the morning, my old friend Simon and I, with whom we often got into all sorts of trouble, headed again to the Bright estate. Walking along a narrow path that runs right along the very edge of the forest, we were already looking forward to how this time we could get something out of the creepy estate, and maybe even from Sarah herself. I involuntarily dreamed of how I could boast in front of other guys showing off my find, maybe even some trinket, an old spoon or a broken comb. And when he was almost there, Simon sharply pulled me into the bushes, first covering my mouth. Old William, slowly hobbling, headed towards the forest, apparently going to the city for something. Unable to contain our joy because the task had become much easier, we could hardly wait for his figure to disappear among the trees. Then, having got out of the shelter, they quickly walked straight to the fence. The old gate creaked disgustingly, but did not visibly betray our presence. Since Sarah didn't show up, carefully making my way inside the house, I involuntarily noticed creepy paintings hanging on the wall in the long corridor. Portraits of seemingly ordinary people, but with terrible grimaces on their faces, adorned almost the entire corridor. Walking quietly and trying to remain unnoticed, we headed to the second floor. And imagine our surprise when, in the first doorway, we saw the creepy silhouette of Sarah. The woman sat directly facing the door, swaying slightly in her chair. Her skinny hands gently stroked some long-dead bird. When she saw us, she jerked. Baring her teeth angrily, the woman with inexplicable agility rushed straight to the door. Screaming in horror, we ourselves, without understanding how, found ourselves on the first floor. And without hesitation, they flew out into the street like a bullet, planning to run away as soon as possible. But a sharp roar that came right behind us made us turn around for a moment. The woman's already twisted body lay right on the steps, and her gaze, frozen forever, was directed straight in our direction. Now, standing near that very door, I felt wild shame for myself and insane remorse for poor Sarah. If it weren't for our stupidity at that time, perhaps the outcome of her life would have been less sad. Having collected my thoughts a little more, I finally crossed the threshold of the long-abandoned estate. Still the same long corridor, but now only with bare walls, desperately beckoning me upstairs. Having taken only a couple of steps, I suddenly noticed a pile of torn-up carcasses on the old rotten floor. Small birds and rodents, as if twisted like the body of unfortunate Sarah, lay along its entire perimeter. Frightened for a second, I immediately drove away stupid thoughts from myself. After all, the house was located in close proximity to the forest and had been empty for a long time. Perhaps a fox or some other wild animal took a fancy to this monastery. Sighing heavily, I carefully climbed the creaky stairs straight to the second floor. Sarah's room, like several years ago, appeared in front of me. Carefully pulling the long-rusted handle, I went inside. The old chair, which also stood opposite the doorway, met me swaying slightly, as if from a light breath of wind. Looking around in surprise, I also noticed the cleanliness of the room and the absence of dust on old things. Sheer involuntarily seized my mind when a quiet crunch sounded right behind me. Jerking sharply, I quickly turned to the front door. A creepy, twisted creature stood on all fours in the doorway. Her unnaturally arched body turned over again with a crunch, fully rising to her feet. Sarah smiled unnaturally, dropping the long-dead bird from her mouth. Bloody drops from her carcass flowed straight onto the floor. Looking into my frightened eyes and unnaturally tilting her head, Sarah sharply rushed forward